Was it fate or some darker design of the warp that chose Captain Titus to stand where all others would break? Some within the Imperium still whisper that he should have died on Graia, that no mortal form could survive what he endured without falling to corruption. Others, those who watched him rise from the shadows of accusation and exile, call him something far more dangerous. A miracle, the last hope of the Ultramarines. The first signs of his legend begin not with glory, but with silence. A cold, metallic silence, deep within the vaults beneath Macragge, silence broken only by the rhythmic march of armored boots. An honor guard escorts a figure who walks with the presence of a man returning from death itself. Blue ceramite, marked by the scars of forgotten wars, glints in the half-light. His expression is carved from stone, unchanged since the day he first appeared before the Inquisition. Titus does not speak. His eyes, however, move across the chamber as if seeing memories burned into the walls. The truth is simple. There was a time when he was lost, stripped of rank, cast out, and hidden behind layers of secrecy so thick that even the Ultramarines whispered his name like a ghost tale. Few knew why. Fewer still dared to ask. But every soul in that chamber sensed the same thing. He had returned changed. The doors behind him seal shut, leaving only the dim blue glow of hololithic projectors. A deep mechanical hum fills the chamber as an ancient archive awakens. It casts wavering shadows across his armor, shadows that seem almost alive. The voice that emerges from the machine is not human, cold, processed, heavy with age. Captain Titus, you are summoned to account. He does not look away from the shifting runes. Floating before him, battlefields, casualties, planetary distress signals. In each of them, the same looming specter. War swelling across the Imperium like a storm tide. Worlds crying for aid the Ultramarines cannot give. Titus answers with a calm, steady voice. I am ready. But deep beneath that composure lies something no machine can measure. A resolve forged in betrayal, in sacrifice, in a truth he has never spoken aloud. For he carries a secret with him, something born in the fires of Graia, something that neither the Inquisition nor his chapter could ever fully explain. Something that should have killed him. Instead, it awakened him. And now, as the archive cycles to its final projection, Titus sees the impossible. An orc tide roaring across the stars, bigger, more coordinated, more cunning than any he has ever faced. Yet behind them, like a shadow stretched across reality, is a different threat. A shape that shifts between forms. A storm of screaming faces. A presence that should not be there. Chaos. He feels it before he sees it, like a whisper brushing the back of his mind. The same whisper he felt on Graia, but this time, it doesn't tempt him, it fears him. The hololith dies, plunging the chamber back into darkness. Only a thin shaft of white light remains, illuminating Titus alone. A test, perhaps, or a reminder. He stands unmoving. Beyond the walls of this place, far from the immaculate marble of Macragge, the Imperium burns. Hive worlds choke on smog and blood. Shrine worlds fall silent beneath the boots of heretics. Astartes' chapters stretch themselves thin, their once mighty numbers now a fraction of what they once were. And always in the distance, there is the echo of something worse. The pale glow of the Great Rift, entire star system swallowed. Entire fleets gone without a trace. For most, this is a nightmare. For Titus, it is a call. A memory rises Graia, its skies carved open by chaos, its manufactorums drowning in orcs, the hammering blast of gunfire, the thunder of the Titan's footsteps. And above it all, the roar of something far older, far hungrier. He remembers standing at the edge of death. He remembers refusing it. And in that refusal, something in him changed. He had watched his brothers fall, his innocence questioned, his loyalty dissected by those who could not understand what he had become. He had walked into darkness and returned bearing strength that terrified the Inquisition. Strength they believed could not exist without corruption. But they were wrong. Titus knew it. And someone else knew it too. As he waits in the chamber, the air shifts. Heavy footsteps approach, slow, measured, precise. The shadows part, revealing a figure draped in a cloak of deep cobalt blue, trimmed with gold. Not a warrior. Something far more dangerous. Calgar, chapter master of the Ultramarines. The man who had once judged Titus more harshly than any enemy. He stops a few paces away, his face carved with the weight of 1,000 obligations. For a moment, neither speaks. The silence stretches, thick enough to crush. Then Calgar breaks it. "We need you." The words hang in the air, not an order, but a confession. Titus studies him, searching for something beneath the armor and titles. What he finds is unexpected. Fear. Not fear of the orcs, not fear of chaos, fear of what is coming. Calgar gestures to the hololithic projector, now dormant. The frontier worlds are screaming for aid. Gilliman fights across 1,000 fronts. Half our brothers are already committed to campaigns that cannot be abandoned. And the Inquisition? Titus asks. Calgar's jaw tightens. They no longer have the luxury of doubt. Something cold settles in Titus' chest. It is not bitterness. He left bitterness behind long ago. It is purpose. Pure and sharpened. Calgar steps closer, lowering his voice. "You are being reinstated." Effective immediately. The words strike the air like a thunderbolt. Not because they shock Titus, he expected this moment, but because Calgar himself seems uncertain, as if he fears the consequences of what he is unleashing. Titus feels the weight of his armor settle differently. He straightens, not with pride, but with acceptance. "Where am I needed?" he asks. Calgar touches a control rune. A star map flickers to life, this time smaller, more focused. A cluster of systems blink red at the edge of Ultima Segmentum. One of them pulses brighter. Graia. The name punches the room like a heart pounding inside a corpse. A part of Titus freezes not in fear, but in memory. His darkest battlefield. His greatest wound. His rebirth. Calgar speaks carefully. Graia has gone dark again. No contact, no data. Only a final astropathic scream. And the orcs? Titus asks. Calgar shakes his head. Not this time. The projection zooms in closer. Grainy images appear, shattered manufactorums, abandoned spires, streets frozen mid-evacuation, and drifting through the shadows. Shapes, twisted, unnatural, warp echoes. The final piece clicks into place. Graia is not calling for help, it is calling for him. Titus turns away from the projection, staring into the dim light spilling across the chamber floor. For a moment, all sound fades. He hears only his heartbeat, slow, steady. He knows what returning to that world means, confronting what changed him, facing what the Inquisition fears, proving whether he is still Astartes or something else. Calgar watches him, waiting for a reaction. But Titus only asks one question: when do I depart? Calgar exhales relief, dread, uncertainty, all braided together. Dawn. A strike cruiser waits in orbit. You won't go alone. Titus nods, though he already knows this is not a mission that will be won with numbers. Not this time. He turns toward the exit, the heavy doors parting before him. White light spills across his armor as he steps into the hallway, but something tugs at the edge of his senses. A whisper, faint, distant, recognizable. A voice he heard once, on a world drowning in fire. A voice that should not exist. He stops, listens, and in the silence, the whisper returns. We are not finished to Titus. He does not react. He simply walks forward, disappearing into the light. Somewhere beyond the void, Graia waits. And something waits with it, watching, remembering, preparing. Titus marches toward his ship, unaware that this mission, this return, will lead him to a truth far more terrifying than anything he faced on Graia. A truth that will challenge the very foundations of what it means to be an Ultramarine. And as the ship doors seal behind him, engines roaring to life, the first hint of that truth takes shape. A signal. A distortion. A message that should have been impossible. A name he should never have heard again. A warning cut off mid-transmission. Just as the lights across the ship flicker, the engines of the striped cruiser thundered beneath Titus' feet, shaking the hull with a vibration that echoed through the corridors like the heartbeat of a dying god. He walked alone for now, his armor's ceramite plates reflecting the harsh white lights above, the hum of the vessel mingling with his own measured breathing. Every step carried the weight of countless battles, countless deaths, his own near destruction on Graia lingering in the marrow of his bones. The whisper had vanished, or perhaps it had never truly been audible, a fragment of the warp brushing against his mind, but the unease it planted remained. Something was waiting. Something patient. Something that had survived the fall of Graia and now watched from the dark between the stars. He entered the command deck, where Kelgar's emissaries and senior officers were already gathered. Maps of the devastated sector floated mid-air, red blips pulsing like the eyes of the dying. The systems around Graia were in chaos, supply lines severed, communications silent, the warp boiling in ways that defied standard astropathic readings. "Captain Titus," a lieutenant intoned, bowing slightly. "Preparations are complete. Recon drones indicate anomalous energy readings within Graia's upper orbit. They're inconsistent with Orc or Tyranid activity." Titus frowned. Anomalous readings. In his experience, those words were never mere science, they were warnings. The warp had its fingerprints everywhere, but what he was about to face felt deliberate. As though the universe itself had carved a path for him, he moved closer to the hololith. Shattered buildings stretched across the projection, smoke rising in phantom wisps. At first glance, Graia seemed abandoned. Entire districts frozen mid-collapse, vehicles overturned, yet no bodies. Factories spewing fire and molten metal, but no sign of resistance. "Where is everyone?" Titus murmured, his voice low, almost to himself. The cold logic of an Astartes mind raced through possibilities: evacuation, warp rift displacement, or something worse. "Unknown," the lieutenant admitted. "No astropathic signals. No survivors have been detected. Only these distortions." He gestured to flickering anomalies, ghostly echoes of movement, half-seen figures that shimmered and vanished. Titus' hand rested on the hilt of his combat blade, the familiar weight a comfort against the storm of unknowns. Graia had been a crucible before. This time, it seemed to have become a mirror one reflecting the very darkness that had almost consumed him. As the cruiser pierced the veil of the upper atmosphere, the world below came into focus. Cities like jagged teeth rose from clouds of ash. Smoke spiraled into the sky, twisted by some unseen turbulence. Yet it was not battle that had carved these scars. The devastation was surgical, precise, almost purposeful. Titus leaned forward. His eyes caught something in the distance, a tower, broken yet intact, emitting a faint golden light. Not a beacon of hope, but a marker, a lure. The lieutenant noticed his gaze. "That is the capital. We have not been able to approach it directly. Energy readings suggest it is protected by a field of some kind arcane, but industrial in origin. We do not know what is maintaining it." Titus' mind, trained in centuries of warfare, considered the impossible. He had faced demons, renegades, and Xenos beyond counting, but this felt like a trap designed specifically for him. He closed his eyes briefly. Memory of Graia surged back, embers on the wind, the screams of his brothers, the sky raining fire. He had survived because he refused to die, because he had stared into the abyss and bent it to his will. He would do the same again. "Prepare an insertion," he commanded, his voice carrying the certainty of inevitability. "I go with a recon squad, only the minimal personnel necessary. We cannot risk detection." The lieutenant hesitated. "Captain, the energy field." "I do not ask," Titus interrupted. "I state." They moved with efficiency, a dozen Ultramarines stepping aboard the drop pods that would carry them through the planet's fractured skies. The descent was turbulent. Graia's atmosphere was no longer a protective shroud, It convulsed with storms that seemed alive, arcs of lightning crawling across clouds like veins of electricity. The drop pods cut through the tempest. Inside, Titus remained silent, watching. Each bolt of lightning revealed glimpses of the ruined world below. Buildings twisted into grotesque shapes, shadows flickering in impossible directions, and at the horizon, that same golden light marking the capital, untouched amidst chaos. Then something moved. Not orcs, not humans. Something that should not have existed. A figure, cloaked in darkness, almost blending with the storm, moved across the desolate streets. Yet its size was impossible, towering over buildings, yet somehow fluid, shifting. The drop pod lurched violently as the storm intensified. Titus' grip on the restraints tightened, but he did not look away. That figure, whatever it was, seemed to acknowledge him. The pod struck the ground with a bone-jarring impact. Dust, ash, and a strange electric tang filled the air. As the hatches opened, Titus and his squad stepped out, boots crunching on cracked stone, eyes scanning. Silence. They advanced cautiously toward the capital, each step measured. Titus could feel it. The pulse of the warp, distorted yet powerful, coiling around the city like a living thing. Every instinct screamed to halt, to withdraw, but he pressed forward. Inside the capital, the walls were intact, yet the air was heavy, charged. Shadows flickered where no light should reach. Hallways stretched endlessly, twisting in ways that defied logic, making the architecture feel almost alive. Then they found the first body, not dead but suspended, frozen mid-motion, as if time itself had been paused. The skin was pale, lips parted, eyes wide in terror. No wounds, no markings, just stillness. One of the Ultramarines stepped closer, cautious. "Captain, it's like the warp has stopped them," Titus finished. His voice was a low growl. "Or kept them as bait." They pressed deeper, and then the whispers returned. Low, almost imperceptible at first, threading through the corridors like smoke. Not one voice, but many, overlapping, echoing, calling his name, mocking him, daring him to continue. Titus felt the old fear rise, the same fear he had known on Graia, but tempered now with something sharper, clarity. He was no longer the young captain of that doomed world. He had survived what no man should, and now he carried that survival like a weapon. At the central chamber, they found the source. A massive figure loomed, partially obscured by a vortex of golden energy. It was humanoid, yet every line of its body suggested something ancient and alien. Armor, yes, but not of human design. Symbols etched across it, glowing faintly, thrummed with power. It spoke, though its lips never moved. A sound inside the mind rather than the ears. "Captain Titus, you return as expected. Graia remembers." And so do I. Titus' heart did not quicken. He had faced demons, renegades, and monsters that clawed at the soul. But this presence, it was different. It was patient, calculating, and familiar in a way that made his blood chill. "What are you?" he demanded. "I am what remains when the world refuses to die. I am the memory of Graia, twisted by the warp and bound to its agony. And you, Titus, you are its key." The words hung in the chamber like smoke. The Ultramarines shifted, tense, but Titus stepped forward, unafraid. This was the moment he had been shaped for, by war, by betrayal, by survival. He felt the old memory rise again, Graia burning. The screams, the betrayals, the survival against impossible odds. And he realized the truth, a cold, brutal clarity. Graia had never been over. The first battle had been only a prelude, a test. And now, the final reckoning had arrived. The figure raised an arm, and the golden energy flared, rippling outward, distorting the chamber. Titus raised his blade, ceramite shining, and felt the pulse of the warp intensify around him. The whispers grew louder, almost intelligible now, but amidst them, one truth rang clear: survival was not enough. Victory would demand something more, something terrifying. Titus' eyes hardened. The fate of the Ultramarines, perhaps of the entire sector, would rest on what he did next. And he understood, in the marrow of his bones, that Graia would demand a price no human or Astartes had ever been asked to pay before. He stepped forward, blade in hand, as the figure awaited, silent but alive. The air crackled. The city held its breath. And for the first time, Titus allowed himself a single thought. This is why I survived, because the true war begins now. And somewhere in the shadows, the golden light pulsed in rhythm with the warp, as if counting down the seconds before the storm consumed everything. The Ultramarines held their formation, silent, watching. But Titus knew, no formation, no strategy, no brother beside him could truly prepare them for what Graia had become. And as the figure stepped forward, the first wave of reality itself bending in its presence, Titus understood the inevitable. The coming battle would not merely be for Graia. It would be for the soul of every Ultramarine still bound to duty, honor, and survival. A chill swept through the chamber, not from the air, not from the warp, from something older, patient, and impossibly cruel. Something that had waited all this time for him. And for the first time, Titus hesitated, not in fear, but in recognition. Graia remembered, and so did he. The ground trembled. The air shimmered. And the first echo of a reality-shattering force surged forward, aimed directly at the last hope of the Ultramarines. Titus tightened his grip on his blade. The storm had begun. The chamber shook again, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to originate not from the walls, but from beneath the city itself. The golden light that had once marked the capital now pulsed violently, flaring outward in jagged arcs that bent the very air. Titus held his ground, ceramite plates groaning with the strain of the energy reverberating through them. Around him, the Ultramarines stiffened, their instincts honed through centuries of war, but even they were uneasy, sensing the unnatural rhythm of the power before them. The figure advanced, slow, deliberate, its form blurring at the edges like molten metal in water. Each step left a faint trail of distortion, as if reality itself could not hold its shape in its presence. Titus raised his blade, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt passed through him. He had faced horrors before, demons clawing at the soul, heretics wielding forbidden sorcery, Xenos with cunning beyond human comprehension. But this felt different. It was not merely an enemy to fight. It was a riddle, a reflection of Graia itself, alive and aware, testing him. Then, a voice not spoken, but felt, vibrating through bone and ceramite. You cannot save what refuses to be saved. You are a survivor, Titus, but survival is weakness. Power is patience. Titus gritted his teeth, the words sinking into him like acid. Patience. The same word he had heard whispered in the depths of Graia's catacombs, when death had walked beside him and he had refused to kneel. And yet, now, patience was a weapon wielded against him. He felt an itch at the edge of his consciousness, a nagging sensation that the reality around him was wrong. The floor beneath them shuddered, fissures splitting open, revealing a glowing, molten core beneath the city. Shapes writhed inside the fractures, indistinct but unmistakably alive faces screaming in silence, limbs reaching upward as though attempting escape. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and something fouler, something metallic and acrid. Titus' visor flickered as sensors failed to register the aberrations fully, unable to reconcile what was and what should not be. "Captain," one of the Ultramarines called, voice tense but controlled. "We should withdraw this. This is beyond anything standard reconnaissance can handle." Titus turned, eyes scanning his brothers. They were strong, disciplined, unflinching. But he saw in them what he had felt in himself. A flicker of something older, buried beneath duty and training. The terror that comes when one realizes the rules of war no longer apply. The Ultramarines were warriors, but Graia's shadow was not a battlefield, it was a crucible. "No," Titus said, his voice calm but iron hard. "We move forward. This ends now or it never ends at all." He took the lead, moving into the core of the capital, past the distorted corridors, where shadows seemed to cling to the walls like living things. Each step carried echoes of a past he could not forget. The screams of dying Astartes, the roar of titans under fire, the acrid smoke that had once choked him on Graia. Those memories were knives pressed against his soul, yet they sharpened his resolve. In the central atrium, the golden figure paused. Its form rippled and shifted, revealing glimpses of something human beneath the energy, a face familiar and twisted, staring at him with eyes that were not quite alive. Titus froze, recognition searing through him. He had seen that face before. "No," he whispered, stepping closer, as the figure's energy coalesced into a mirror-like shimmer. In its reflection, the capital, the city, the fissures beneath, all seemed to collapse in on themselves, as though the world were a canvas being wiped clean. And then he saw it, himself, but not as he was. A version of Titus that had survived Graia differently, one that had fallen, one that had accepted death, one that had embraced what the warp offered instead of resisting. The Ultramarines shifted behind him, murmuring low prayers. The realization hit Titus like a thunderclap. Graia was not just corrupted by the warp, it was alive because it had learned from him. This entity, this force, had shaped itself around his survival, around his choices, around the very essence of what made him Titus. The golden figure's voice cut through his thoughts, clearer now, almost intimate. "You see only what you survived. You cannot see what you became, what you left behind, what you refused to accept. And yet, here you are, walking into the womb of your own undoing." Titus' grip on his blade tightened. Every instinct screamed to strike, to end it before it could act. But this was not a foe to be fought with brute force alone. This was a reflection of the war itself, a sentient embodiment of Graia's suffering and cunning. And somewhere deep inside, he knew it had been waiting for him, not to kill him, but to teach him something far older than survival. A pulse of energy emanated from the figure, rippling outward. The walls twisted, the floor shifted beneath their boots, and the Ultramarines stumbled, struggling to maintain formation. Titus felt the pull of the warp, but it was not chaotic. It was deliberate, almost surgical, tugging at memories and instincts, testing resolve. "Hold the line," he barked, voice cutting through the distorted air. "Do not let it separate us." They advanced, slowly, carefully, each step a battle against the reality around them. And as they reached the central dais, the golden light flared again, and the figure extended an arm. From its palm, a stream of images poured forth, not attacks, not weapons, but visions. Graia before the Orc invasion, Graia during the battles, Graia at the moment of his first resurrection. Each memory twisted, altered, showing horrors that might have been, worlds that had fallen, brothers lost to choices he had not made. And then one final image, almost hidden beneath the rest. A world beyond Graia, untouched by conflict, serene in its beauty. Green forests, crystal rivers, skies unscarred by war. And in the center, a throne, empty, but it felt familiar. Familiar in a way that gnawed at Titus' memory. The realization hit him like ice. Graia had been a test, but not merely of his courage or skill. It had been a door to something else, something larger than the Ultramarines, larger than the Imperium, something waiting for him to open it. He staggered back slightly, the weight of understanding pressing down. This was never about orcs, never about chaos, never even about survival. Graia had been a lesson in inevitability, a crucible designed to shape him into a key. The figure's voice filled the chamber, resonating within bone and ceramite alike. "The Ultramarines are the first, but not the last. Your choices echo, Titus. Your survival is a beacon. But be warned, the universe does not wait for the worthy. It waits for the inevitable." Titus' mind raced, circling the truth he could not yet fully grasp. If Graia was a key, what did it unlock? And for whom? The golden figure's form shimmered, stretching upward into a column of light, almost merging with the ceiling above. The fissures in the floor widened, molten energy spilling outward, threatening to consume the entire chamber. The Ultramarines braced, weapons raised, ceramides straining against the unnatural forces. "Fall back," Titus commanded, voice steady despite the chaos. "Regroup and reassess. We do not yet understand what we face, but we will not be caught unprepared." But even as he spoke, he realized something terrifying. The figure was not retreating, it was waiting. Waiting for him to make the next move. Waiting for him to see what he could not yet see. Waiting to draw him further into Graia's heart. And in that moment, he understood the subtle truth that the visions had hinted at. The war he had been fighting, Graia, the orcs, chaos, even the survival of the Ultramarines, was only a fraction of the story. The real conflict was not outside him. It was inside. It had always been inside. He felt a tug at the edges of his consciousness. A whisper carried on the warp, faint yet insistent. "You cannot run from what you are. You are not just a survivor, Titus. You are a catalyst." Titus gritted his teeth, taking a deep, controlled breath. The weight of centuries of service, of battles survived and brothers lost, pressed down upon him, yet he drew strength from it. Survival alone would not suffice. He had to understand, to master, to confront the truth Graia demanded. The golden figure pulsed again, the energy intensifying until the air itself shimmered with its presence. And then, as if sensing Titus' resolve, it did something unexpected. It split. Not into duplicates, but into reflections, dozens of Titus, each representing choices he had made, paths he had rejected, moments he had survived. They moved, circling him, forcing him to confront every possibility of himself. He raised his blade, ceramite humming. Each reflection mirrored his actions, his doubts, his triumphs, and his failures. The room seemed to shrink, the walls bending inward, the fissures widening, the molten glow painting their faces in stark, horrifying relief. And yet, amidst the chaos, Titus saw one reflection separate from the rest. It was not a past choice, nor a possible future. It was a question, a challenge. A shadowed version of himself, standing tall, confident, unbroken, yet not him. For the first time, Titus realized something that made the blood in his veins turn cold. Graia was not the enemy, it was the mirror. And what it reflected was not just survival, it was destiny. The reflections closed in, the molten fissures pulsed. The golden figure loomed, patient, inexorable. And in the silence between heartbeats, Titus understood the next truth. He was no longer merely returning to Graia. He was stepping into what Graia had always been shaping him for. And in that moment, the question struck him harder than any weapon ever could. What exactly am I meant to unlock? The chamber trembled, light and shadow swirling, as if reality itself were holding its breath, waiting for his answer. Titus gritted his teeth, raising his blade high, and took a single step forward. The storm inside Graia answered. The chamber seemed to pulse with a heartbeat not its own, the molten fissures throbbing like veins beneath the cracked stone floor. Titus took another step forward, each footfall echoing through the distorted space, each echo warping reality around it. The reflections, the many possibilities of himself, circulated like predators around prey, circling, observing, anticipating his next choice. The golden figure remained still, but the air around it shimmered with an energy that felt almost alive, watching, measuring, waiting. For a moment, everything fell silent. Even the distant rumble of molten energy beneath the city paused, as if the world itself held its breath. Titus let his gaze sweep over the reflections, seeing not only what he had done but what he had avoided. The faces were not mocking, not angry, they were patient, patient as the universe had always been, as Graia itself had been. Each one a memory of choices, losses, sacrifices, each one a test of who he was and who he could become. He allowed himself a pause, closing his eyes beneath the helmet. The weight of centuries, of battles, of fallen brothers pressed down, yet he welcomed it. The memories of Graia, of Macragge, of every world he had fought for, of every death he had survived. They were no longer burdens. They were fuel. A reminder of what had been asked of him and what he had endured. When he opened his eyes, the reflections had shifted subtly. One step, one movement, and they were no longer around him. They were before him, leading toward the central dais. The golden figure's energy had grown, flaring higher, almost reaching the warped ceiling, sending rivulets of light rippling across the chamber. The fissures beneath them widened, molten tongues licking the edges of shattered stone, threatening to consume anything that lingered too long. Titus moved slowly, deliberately, toward the dais. The Ultramarines flanked him, silent and watchful, ceramite plates catching the distorted light, weapons ready but restrained. They had faced horrors before, yet even their stoic discipline betrayed the tension coiling in the air. Every instinct screamed caution, every sensor and every soul whispered warning, yet there was no retreat. Not here, not now. The closer Titus drew to the dais, the more the air seemed to thicken, as if the energy itself resisted his approach. His breath caught in the helmet. The golden figure's form began to ripple, stretching and condensing, folding in upon itself like molten metal cooling and then liquefying again. The whispers returned, more insistent now, threading through the minds of every Ultramarine present, layering memories of failure and survival, hope and despair. Titus could feel them, not as an external force, but as a pressure on his very identity. Each whisper was a question. Do you understand who you are? Do you understand what you survived? Do you understand what comes next? The voice inside his mind was relentless, insidious, but beneath it, something deeper, something elemental, began to stir, resolve. He stepped onto the dais, the molten fissures licking closer, the air shimmering like liquid glass. The golden figure regarded him, not as an adversary, not as an ally, but as a mirror. Its form shifted again, this time taking a shape terrifying in its simplicity. A perfect reflection of Titus, down to the tiniest detail, yet with eyes that burned with unnatural knowledge. Titus felt his chest tighten. This was not merely an entity. This was Graia itself made conscious, shaped by the warp, by suffering, by the echoes of his own survival. It had waited for him, learning from him, testing him, challenging him to comprehend the scale of what had been unleashed. "You are the key," the mirrored voice intoned, resonating within his mind rather than through the air. Not the last hope, but the beginning. The choice you make now will ripple across the Imperium, across existence. Do you understand? Titus did. And yet, he did not fully understand. Not the extent of the danger, not the full measure of the power pressing against him, not the consequences of stepping fully into Graia's heart. He only knew one truth: he could not turn away. He had survived impossible odds before. He would not falter now. The reflections shifted again, coalescing into a spiral that extended upward, connecting the golden figure to the chamber's warped ceiling. Energy crackled along the spiral, sparking against walls, dancing across fissures, sending arcs of molten light across the Ultramarines. Each spark was a whisper, each flare a memory, each pulse a challenge. Suddenly, the chamber quaked violently. The fissures beneath them widened further, molten rivers surging outward. The floor cracked, and fragments of stone began to drift upward, as if gravity itself had been unmade. One of the Ultramarines shouted, weapons firing automatically, but the shots went through the reflections harmlessly, their ceramite armor catching only echoes of heat and energy. Titus gritted his teeth, gripping his blade. He realized then that conventional attacks were meaningless. The golden figure and the reflections responded not to force, but to presence, to will, to understanding. Graia demanded more than courage or strength. It demanded insight. He forced himself to stillness, planting both feet firmly on the stone. The whispers intensified, almost overwhelming, yet he focused on the rhythm beneath them, the pulse of the molten fissures, the beat of energy through the figure, the cadence of his own heart. Slowly, deliberately, he began to move not with weapons, but with intent. Every step, every gesture, was a dialogue with the entity, a negotiation with reality itself. The reflections responded. They recoiled, twisted, and then reformed, circling faster, forcing Titus to keep pace, to adjust, to anticipate. The Ultramarines around him mirrored his movements, a living extension of his will, their unity amplifying the force he projected. Together, they became more than warriors. They became a focus, a channel for the energy saturating the chamber. And then, a new layer of the vision opened. Through the golden figure, through the reflections, Titus saw glimpses of other worlds, shattered moons, burning cities, screaming voids, each one a warning, a fragment of the path that awaited him. In one vision, he saw an Ultramarine strike force, countless brothers, frozen mid-battle, their bodies twisted by an unseen hand. In another, a lone figure, a boy, barely armored, standing amidst the ruins of a hive city, gazing at him as though knowing him. The images struck him with a clarity that was both terrifying and galvanizing. Graia's test was only the beginning. Survival was not enough. Not for him, not for the Ultramarines, not for the Imperium. The stakes were higher than he had imagined. The choice he made here now would ripple far beyond this world. A sudden flare of energy erupted from the golden figure, illuminating the chamber in stark, blinding light. The molten fissures roared, sending showers of sparks across stone. The reflections froze mid-motion, their eyes converging on Titus, awaiting his decision. And then, in the silence that followed the flare, something unexpected happened. One of the reflections stepped forward, not aggressive, not threatening, but purposeful. It mirrored him perfectly, yet the expression was subtly different, softer, almost human, yet infused with unyielding determination. It was an echo not of his past, but of his potential, what he could become if he chose to act with vision, not merely reaction. Titus felt a sudden surge of understanding, a realization threading through the chaos. Graia had not trapped him, it had offered him a choice, not survival. Not victory, but transcendence. The Ultramarines tensed, sensing the shift, ready for anything. The chamber trembled with expectation. The golden figure pulsed, a low hum that seemed to vibrate through reality itself. For a heartbeat, time seemed to pause. The fissures, the molten rivers, the twisted reflections all waited. The storm of energy and warp was held in suspension, as if the universe itself had paused to witness what Titus would do next. And in that moment, standing before the spiral of reflections, before the conscious energy of Graia, Titus understood one unshakable truth. The battle was no longer outside. The battle was within. And the choice he made here would determine not just Graia's fate, but the fate of everything the Ultramarines had sworn to protect. He raised his blade. The chamber held its breath, and the golden figure pulsed once more, brighter, faster, the energy coiling around the spiraling reflections, the molten fissures responding to each subtle movement. The storm was about to break. Titus stepped forward, and reality itself seemed to lean in, waiting for the first strike of what could be salvation or annihilation. A single clear thought crystallized in his mind, sharper than any weapon. I am the key. And in that instant, everything began to shift. Titus stepped forward. The blade in his hand seemed suddenly small, a simple tool in a chamber alive with impossible energy. The golden figure pulsed, spiraling higher, fissures below roaring like the heartbeat of a world that had refused death. The reflections surrounded him, circling, morphing, flickering between what was, what could be, and what should never have existed. For a moment, the weight of it struck him fully, the centuries of duty, the lives lost, the countless worlds he had fought to protect. The echoes of Graia screamed in silence around him, pressing against the edges of his mind. And yet, beneath it all, there was a quiet, steady core, clarity. He had been tested. He had survived, and now he understood why. The golden figure's voice filled him not as a sound, but as a pulse, threading through bone and ceramite, resonating with the very marrow of his being. You are the culmination, the impossible choice. Graia made you, and Graia will unmake you. But only if you allow it. Titus raised his head. The reflections mirrored his motion, hundreds of him converging toward the spiral of light. Each one held his memories, his fears, his courage. They were a storm. They were himself. They were the universe pressing him to act. And he understood that their purpose was not to fight him, not to deceive him. They existed to force him to see. See what? He asked himself. And then it came, unbidden, unrelenting, the truth. Graia had not been a world in peril. Graia had been a living lesson, a crucible designed to test, to shape, to awaken. And in the chaos of that test, Titus had been made more than a survivor. He had been made a fulcrum. The golden figure pulsed again, and suddenly, the reflections aligned. They formed a perfect mirror of the chamber, stretching upward, downward, outward. Every fissure, every molten rivulet, every distorted corridor now existed twice, once in reality, once in reflection. And in the center of it all, a single path emerged, carved by light and shadow. Titus knew, in the core of his being, that this path led to the heart of Graia's consciousness. The storm had a center, and he would face it. He advanced. Each step reverberated through the chamber, and the reflections moved with him, not to attack, but to guide, to challenge. Every pulse of the golden figure, every tremor of the molten fissures, every whisper threading through the minds of the Ultramarines, pushed him toward a single inevitability. He reached the dais. The figure hovered above it, coalescing into a form simultaneously familiar and impossible human, yet woven from the threads of warp and memory. Its eyes locked on his, and for the first time, Titus saw not judgment, not challenge, but understanding. "You were always meant to return," it said, the voice inside him, around him, everywhere. "Not to save Graia, not to reclaim it, but to awaken it. To choose its destiny as you have chosen your own. And in doing so, to shape the fate of countless worlds beyond." Titus' breath caught in the helmet. He understood now. Graia was not a victim. Graia was a teacher, a mirror, a vessel of the warp itself, shaped by his survival and by the echoes of the Imperium. And the golden figure, this impossible radiant entity, was its heart. He lowered his blade, slowly, deliberately. The reflections stilled. The chamber seemed to wait. Even the molten fissures calmed, the roar softening to a low, steady pulse. For the first time there was silence, and then he saw it. The single figure among the reflections, the one that had separated before, stepped forward. Its eyes were not warped, not distorted. They were clear, unflinching, filled with certainty. It was him, and yet it was not him. It was the man he could have been. The man he could yet become. Titus understood the choice. The golden figure pulsed, brighter now, weaving light and shadow, reality and reflection. Will you claim it? Claim what? He thought. Power? Knowledge? Victory? No. The choice was not about conquest, not about survival. It was about acceptance. Acceptance of what he had endured, what he had become, and what he was capable of. Graia demanded a culmination, a surrender to understanding, not fear. Titus closed his eyes, letting the weight of centuries press down, letting the pain, the loss, the fear, and the fury flow through him, letting it meld with purpose, clarity, and vision. He felt it then, the pulse of the world, the rhythm of the warp, the unity of every life lost and saved. He was not alone. He never had been. When he opened his eyes, the chamber had changed. The reflections no longer swirled chaotically. They formed a circle around the golden figure, rising in unison, bending toward him. The fissures beneath glowed softly, molten light ebbing in harmony with the pulse of energy above. Graia had stopped testing him. It had revealed itself. He reached out, stepping onto the spiral of light. As he did, a surge of energy coursed through him, not violent, not destructive, but illuminating. Memories of Graia's devastation, of his brothers, of worlds lost and spared, flashed before him. And in each he saw the golden figure, not as a foe, not as an obstacle, but as a reflection of potential, of what the universe could become if he acted with courage tempered by wisdom. The Ultramarines held their positions, silent, watching him. Even they felt it, the shift in the chamber, the weight of destiny settling into form. They knew their captain faced something beyond them, beyond mere war, something elemental, something eternal. And then it happened. The golden figure merged with the spiral, and a single beam of pure light shot upward, tearing through the chamber, through the distorted architecture, through the very fissures of the world itself. Titus felt the energy enter him, not as a weapon, but as clarity, understanding, and purpose. He did not fight it. He accepted it. He became the key Graia had shaped him to be. The reflections dissolved, each one folding back into him. The whispers ceased, replaced by a profound silence that seemed to encompass every molecule of the chamber, every atom of Graia. The molten fissures cooled, their glow softening to a warm, steady pulse beneath his feet. The golden figure, Graia itself, no longer loomed. It was still patient, waiting for the choice to be completed. Titus stood alone on the dais, blade lowered, ceramite glinting in the soft light. For the first time, he felt not the pressure of survival, not the weight of responsibility, but the clarity of purpose. Graia had not been conquered. It had not been destroyed. It had been understood. And in that understanding, Titus realized the truth. The battle for Graia was over. But the war, the true war, was only beginning. Graia had awakened something in him, something that could not be ignored, something that would ripple across the Imperium like fire through dry grass. He stepped back from the dais, feeling the weight of the chamber around him, the silence, the molten light, the calm after the storm. The Ultramarines exhaled as one, sensing the shift, trusting him without question. The golden light dimmed, the fissures beneath settling, but the pulse remained, a reminder, a heartbeat, a promise. And yet, even as the chamber calmed, a new awareness stirred in Titus' mind. Graia had revealed itself, but it had not answered all questions. The visions he had seen, the worlds beyond, the throne untouched, the boy in the hive city, they were warnings, threads of something larger, something vast, something inevitable. He knew one thing with absolute certainty: the universe was changing. And he, Titus, was no longer simply a captain of the Ultramarines. He was a fulcrum, a key, a choice upon which countless destinies would pivot. The chamber's light dimmed further. The reflections of the city, of the chamber, of Graia itself, shimmered softly and then faded. Silence remained. Not empty, but alive with possibility. Titus looked out across the ruined city, the sky of Graia cracking with faint streaks of warp energy, and allowed himself a breath. The storm had passed temporarily, but beyond the horizon, he could feel it, the movement of inevitability, the pull of worlds yet unmade. He lowered his head slightly, as if bowing to the understanding that had been granted. And in that pause, in the quiet after the storm, he allowed himself the briefest moment of reflection. He had faced death, corruption, the whispers of the warp, and the echoes of his own failures. He had survived. He had understood. He had become more than a soldier. He had become a beacon. Yet even as the calm settled, a new tremor pulsed beneath his feet. Faint at first, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable. The pulse of Graia had changed. Something else was stirring. Something older, something patient. Titus tightened his grip on his blade. The calm was a promise. The storm was returning. And beyond the horizon, the universe waited. The tremor beneath Graia faded gradually, leaving only a soft hum, like the exhale of a world recovering from centuries of pain. Titus stood at the center of the capital, the blade in his hand lowered, ceramite catching the faint glow of molten veins that still threaded the floor. Around him, the city was silent, yet it no longer felt empty. It felt alive, not in the chaotic sense it had before, not screaming with the agony of war, but aware, reflective, a world breathing after a long, impossible struggle. The Ultramarines formed around him, their armor catching the subtle light as they surveyed the chamber. There were no cheers, no exultation. Victory here was not measured in bodies slain or enemies defeated. Victory was recognition, understanding. Survival had been merely the first step. Now they bore witness to what true resilience could accomplish, not as soldiers, but as witnesses to a world that had demanded more than courage. Titus let his gaze sweep across the room. The reflections, the golden figure, the molten fissures all had receded, leaving only the quiet majesty of a city transformed. Graia itself had shifted in ways he could not fully articulate. He had stepped into its heart and emerged not unscathed, not untested, but clearer, whole. And yet, the clarity was not simple. The visions he had glimpsed, the throne on a distant world, the boy in the ruined hive city, the unbroken potential of countless lives remained. They were reminders that the universe's weight could not be lifted by a single hero, that the survival of one world did not guarantee the safety of another. Graia had shown him the scale of consequence, the fragile nature of hope, and the eternal echo of choice. He walked slowly to the edge of the chamber, past the molten veins cooling into dark, smooth stone. Outside, the skies of Graia were changing. Clouds streaked with faint golden light drifted across the horizon. The storms that had once raged unchecked now whispered softly, and in their quiet, Titus sensed a subtle harmony. The world had been scarred, yes, but it had endured. And in that endurance, it had achieved a kind of grace. He paused, watching the distant city spires, some twisted and broken, others still upright, defying the chaos that had threatened to unmake them. His mind traced the memories of Graia's fall and rise, the screams of his brothers, the roar of the Titans, the shifting light of the warp, and he understood something that had eluded him before. Survival alone was never the point. It was what one did with survival, the choices made after the storm, that defined meaning. Beside him, a young Ultramarine, one of the newer recruits, lowered his helmet, revealing eyes wide with wonder, perhaps fear, perhaps both. Titus did not speak immediately. Words felt small against the weight of the experience, unnecessary when the silence already spoke. And yet, he found himself saying, softly, as if to the boy, to the city, to the universe itself, "We endure because we must. We rise because we are asked to. And we act because in our action, even the impossible may find balance." The young warrior nodded, understanding less in literal terms and more in the resonance of presence, the gravity of what it meant to follow a man who had faced death and returned, carrying not only his life but the soul of a world. Around them, the other Ultramarines remained still, absorbing the rare calm, aware that what they had witnessed was beyond medals, beyond commendations, beyond rank. It was revelation. Titus turned from the city toward the horizon. Graia stretched out below, a testament to endurance, to transformation. The fissures glimmered faintly, not threatening but alive, veins of memory and history pulsing softly beneath the surface. He could feel the world's consciousness in the quiet, acknowledging him, understanding that he had stepped into its heart and walked away changed. And he in turn understood Graia, its purpose, its patience, its quiet insistence that those who survived must act with intention, with thought, with humility. For a moment, he closed his eyes. He remembered the whisper that had reached him at the edge of the chamber when he first returned. "We are not finished, Titus." He smiled faintly, not a triumphant smile, not a victorious one, but a knowing one. Graia had been finished. It had fulfilled its purpose. He, Titus, had fulfilled his. And yet, the whisper remained. Not threatening now, but gentle, patient. The world was always patient. The universe always waited. Opening his eyes, Titus saw the golden light fading into the distant horizon, soft streaks of warmth and possibility marking the clouds. He understood that Graia had not simply tested him, it had offered him insight. The universe's challenges were not to be conquered by force alone, but approached with clarity, with understanding, with courage tempered by reflection. He turned to his Ultramarines. "We leave now," he said, voice calm yet carrying the weight of everything they had endured. "Graia survives. We survive. And we carry both forward wherever we go." The men nodded. They did not speak. They did not need to. The understanding was mutual, a bond forged in fire and silence. Together, they moved toward the exits, leaving the heart of Graia quiet but alive, carrying with them the lessons of what it meant to face the impossible and emerge not merely unbroken, but aware. Outside, the sun, or something like it, filtered through warp-distorted skies, rose slowly, spilling warm light across the broken spires, the fissured streets, the molten veins now cooling into gentle rivers of stone. The air was still, charged with potential but free from the chaos that had gripped it. And for the first time in centuries, Graia exhaled. Titus paused at the edge of the city, helmet lifted, taking in the scene. The wind carried the scent of ash, of metal, of rain yet to fall. He thought of the boy in the visions, of the throne untouched, of worlds still waiting. The universe was vast. It was patient. And it required more than courage. It required understanding. A soft rumble beneath his feet reminded him that Graia was not silent forever, that it would not remain static, that the universe would continue to test, to shift, to demand. And Titus, standing at the threshold of what was known and what awaited beyond, understood something profound. Survival was not an end. It was a choice. And every choice echoed far beyond the self. He let the thought settle, deep and quiet, as he turned back toward his brothers. They were not heroes in the tales of triumph or conquest. They were witnesses. They were participants. They were keepers of the understanding Graia had imparted. And for that, they carried a responsibility heavier than any armor, sharper than any blade. As they departed the city, stepping lightly over cooled veins of molten stone, Titus allowed himself a final reflection. He thought of the whispers that had guided him, the reflections that had challenged him, the golden figure that had demanded he see beyond himself. And he understood that Graia's greatest lesson was not about victory, not about survival, not about the wars that raged across the stars. It was about perspective, about what one carries forward after the storm has passed, about the quiet, enduring choices that define meaning in a universe that often seems indifferent. The horizon stretched endlessly ahead, fractured but luminous. The Ultramarines moved forward, carrying not only their captain, but the lessons of a world that had been tested, broken, and remade. And Titus, walking among them, felt the weight of possibility settle over his shoulders, not crushing, not threatening, but empowering. The universe waited, the universe tested. And he, and those like him, were the fulcrum upon which it pivoted. He looked up at the sky, streaked with remnants of warp light, and allowed himself a thought both simple and profound. The storms come, and we endure. The world demands more, and we answer. And perhaps, somewhere in the quiet after chaos, understanding is born. For a long moment, he said nothing. He breathed in the air of Graia, smelled the ash, felt the pulse of the cooling fissures beneath, and understood that life, even amid ruin, could carry beauty. That survival was a gift. That awareness was power. The Ultramarines prepared for departure. Engines roared to life in the distance, a reminder that the Imperium waited, that the wider universe continued unabated, and that their journey, though paused here, would carry on across the stars. Titus took one final step to the edge of the city, standing tall, feeling the wind stir his cloak, and allowed the quiet to fill him fully. Graia had given its lesson. The universe had shown its face. And he, Titus, would carry both forward, not as a savior, not as a conqueror, but as a witness, a participant, a man forged by impossible trials into something enduring. And in the distance, beyond the fractured horizon, he allowed a single question to form, unspoken but heavy in its weight. What other worlds wait quietly, patiently for the choices yet to come? And in that question, he found both caution and hope, knowing the journey would never truly end, and that every step forward was a continuation of what Graia had begun. Titus exhaled, slowly, letting the calm wash over him. For now, the storm had passed. For now, understanding prevailed. And as the first rays of distant light touched the spires of Graia, he allowed himself the quietest of smiles. A smile not of victory, but of comprehension, of purpose, of resolve. The camera would pull back slowly, rising above the capital, above the city, above the world itself, showing the silent majesty of Graia in the soft light. The fissures glimmer faintly. The skies glow with warp-filtered color. And the Ultramarines march onward, carrying what they have learned into the stars. Titus' voice, calm and steady, echoes over the scene. We endure, we carry forward, and we act, because to act is to live, to witness is to understand, and to survive is to know that our choices echo farther than we ever imagine. The frame lingers on the horizon, and the audience feels the weight of the journey, the depth of the lessons, and the quiet, enduring power of the storm past. If Graia has taught anything, it is that the universe waits. And in waiting, it asks only this: how will we answer? Like, comment, and share if you felt the weight of Graia's journey with Titus, and consider, what would you carry forward from the storms you have faced?